Good evening, girls. Good evening. We start. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good evening. I'm echoing, I think. Okay, I think that is because of the live streaming. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm echoing it.
I think you need to mute the live.
I've done it. I've muted. I muted the live stream. So we'll spend a little time on The Whale Rider. Did you enjoy the book, The Whale Rider? Share screen. Can you see the screen? Can you see the screen?
Yes, yes, we can.
I just want to make it full screen. You're just seeing the whole thing with the panels on the side, right?
Yeah.
I want to want to make it full screen. Oh, I'm looking
Go
for
to
the.
slideshow.
Yeah, I can't.
Slideshow next on the top left next to animations.
Can I do full screen and then share?
No, you can go to slideshow. Can you see that next to animations?
Just a moment. Yeah, I got it. It was blocking.
Yeah, you need to click that.
Yeah. So here we are. Is this fine? You got the full screen now, haven't you?
Not yet.
It's showing the full screen for me. Are you able to see something now?
We can see the entire thing with all the slides, and not only the current slide.
No? I'm moving the slides. You're not able to see that either?
No.
Back to this format then. Now?
No, ma'am. Maybe you can try stopping the screen and stop sharing the screen and then share it again.
sharing. Says that my internet connection is not stable. Okay, we'll begin with whatever we have. So, anyhow, that was very intense novel, um, something very a rewarding read, you can say, and ennobling because it's full of values. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Yes, yeah. And what would be the basic takeaway from The Whale Rider? It would be connectedness to nature. Anything that you has been your takeaway?
The sacredness of the land and nature.
Sacred it's of land, nature, and also community life, how people live together in community, how relations and people of the community are interdependent. So this is one thing about indigenous literature, whether it is Australian, even Maori, and any community that uh, has not got mainstreamed, no, or what we might call tribal people, indigenous communities. You know, there are two islands, the North Island and South Island in New Zealand. And the story is set in Wangara, which is on the east coast of New Zealand. It's in the northeast of the North Island. Okay, so you can visualize that. And the full name of this island is Wangara Mai Tauhiti. Now, even in when we did the Bone People, we focused on spirituality, and even that novel we could see the connection to the sea. Here, the connection to the sea is explored is presented right from the start. And the leader of the tribe at this point of time is Koro. What's his name? Apirana. Yeah. And this place, Wangara, is regarded as a spiritual center. So ancestors play a very important part in the worldview of the Maori people. They have to revere their ancestors. And as I've given you in several examples, when I spoke about the human remains that were repatriated from the British museums to South Australia, that was called the return of the Naranjadi tribe. They brought the skulls and bones and they returned them to the land. They saying that they want their ancestors with them. We want our old people with us. So there is this belief that the ancestors are there to guide them, to guard them, and they are spirits which protect the land and the people. In Australia, the connection to land is also through totems. So every child born has a totem. That totem might be a crocodile, might be a flower like the wattle, might be a crow, something associated with the birth of that person. And we in more Western thought, we might call them guardian angels, but probably not. We can't equate the concept of guardian angels and totems, but totems are some spiritual connection or some things in nature which is very exclusively connected to the life of a person. So some people might have the snake as a totem. In our study of New Zealand literature, we haven't come across the idea of totems, but here we see that the whale is connected to the people of Wangara, all right, to this tribe. And their ancestor, one of the ancestors to whom they can trace their presence on the island is Paikya. Now, there's one thing that we have to understand is the ancestors go back to hundreds and hundreds of years. So prior to Paikya, there must have been some other ancestor. But Paikya is an ancestor who's connected with the existence of the people who inhabit this island. So there must have been communities of people who came and lived on this island, and probably those communities got wiped away or they moved on to some other place. But the continuity of this tribe and the continuity of the descendants of Paikya is there in this island at the time of this novel, which is, of course, the 20th century. And in most of these myths, whether Australian Aboriginal or Maori, you find the reference to ancestors arriving in canoes. So they arrived on boats, they sailed, and it could be traced to the idea that, there was initially there was Gondwana land, where all the continents like Australia and all were part of a huge landmass called Gondwana. And then they say that due to tectonic plate shifts, these landmasses drifted. That's one theory. There's another theory that these people arrived in uh, small uh, groups and different points of time, and they inhabited and peopled these places in the South Pacific. So, as you know, the South Pacific is uh, full of islands, the Solomon Islands, the New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Tonga Islands. So that islander culture is there. And this book has a prologue, an epilogue, and the story narrated in 3 parts over about 16 or 17 chapters. And what we have to appreciate in this writing is that the sea, the land, the creatures in the sea, the creatures on the land, whether they are two-legged creatures, whether they're human or whether they are animal, or whether they're plants, whether it is elements like water or air, whether it is the sky, they are personalities. They have a personality. They think, they feel, they speak, they act. All right. We are with our Western orientation, we are oriented to dividing our world into animate and inanimate things. All right, especially and even animals are referred to as it, not he or she. And even in that category, which is called it, we have objects like doors, chairs, which are which are clearly labeled as inanimate. Now, in this narrative, all of them are animate, all right? And they are endowed with power to create change. And as we go along, I will emphasize that they are all sentient, capable of feeling. The sea feels, the sky feels, the sea speaks, the land speaks. And that is what is unique about Australian Aboriginal and Maori culture, Maori spirituality. The connectedness to the land is not like the Western pantheism, not like Wordsworthian awe of presence in nature, right? Nor is it like what we call animism, what the tribal people of India have. They worship forces in nature. They worship trees. They worship rain, and they worship maybe some animal. So, but these are deified. So there's no deification. There is just awe, respect, and reverence, a deep reverence. What is reverence? Reverence is the kind of feeling that you have when you pray, deep respect, fear. And why is there this reverence? Because they are aware of the colossal loss or damage that can take place if they do not accord to these elements in nature the honor, respect, and treatment that they deserve, that they have to be preserved, that they have to be given their space, that man and his intrusive ways cannot that man and his intrusive ways are unacceptable. So these are quotes that I have taken from the prologue, which this says, that is not to say that the land and sea were without life. See, you can't describe them as inanimate. That's what I said. Without vivacity. The tuatara, the ancient lizard with its third eye, was sentinel here, unblinking in the hot sun, watching and waiting to the east. The moa browsed in the giant wingless herds across the southern island. Within the warm stomach of the rainforest, kiwi, wika, and other birds foraged for fufu and similar succulent insects. The forests were loud with the clatter of tree bark, chatter of cicada, and murmur of fish-laden streams. Sometimes the forest grew suddenly quiet, and in the wet bush could be heard the filigree of fairy laughter like sparkling glissando. The sea too teemed with fish, but they also seemed to be waiting. They swam in brilliant shoals. Now, what were they waiting for? They were waiting for something called which is described as the gifting. The first of the ancients was coming, journeying from the island kingdom beyond the horizon. So a spiritual being was on his way, and the whole of creation was waiting for this being to come. And even so, you can visualize this. A fish swims. A lizard is a reptile. Okay. And birds live on branches, they fly in the air. But though these creatures have different habitats, they live and work in synchrony. And they are aware of the harmony that they create together. So this harmonious existence, they are tuned to live in harmony. And they are sensitive to the changes around us. They are attuned to what is their role on the planet, what is their role in life. And somehow, and this level of sensitivity to the changes that are taking place, sensitivity to the spiritual order of the universe, that these creatures are aware that there is a person coming. We see that even in our some of us who are observant and look at nature, we observe how you would, I don't know if you witnessed an earthquake, that when an earthquake takes place, before that the birds are very restless. All right, the birds, they wake up in the middle of the night because they have sensed the tremors before man has sensed. So that is the way the creatures are sensitive to all changes that are taking place in the belly of the earth and what is arriving on the horizon, out there in the zenith, everything. These tiny creatures with small bodies and we cannot say with small frail bodies, but a unique intelligence. Each of them possesses a unique intelligence. So they were all waiting. Are you with me? Have you got what I said so far?
Yes, Guru.
Okay. So as I said, they are sentient beings. Okay, I describe them as sentient, think, feel, and speak. So here this passage says that the earth and sea began to feel the sharp pangs of need for an end to the yearning. They were yearning for that spiritual being to come. The forests, trees, these trees sent out sweet perfumes, and the some of the fish, they leaped. Okay, the flying fish were leaping and looking beyond the horizon, and because they were looking forward to this, they were the first to spot the arrival of this person, this creature, this creation, and to announce the coming. So now these, as I told you, they live in harmony, they work in sync, and they feel they are connected to each other. For instance, I've had this experience when I was in a rural place. The sky was clear, but we could hear an insect, and a villager who was with me said, "Tonight it's going to rain." So the insect was sending out signals about the imminent rain, about the rain which was going to come. So these creatures, they listen to each other. When it's not that bird calls are meant only for birds. There are other creatures also listening to the calls of the birds and interpreting it for their lives, their habitat. And of course, you think about the web of life, all right, where one creature is food for another creature. Creatures are able to read they're able to hear the footfalls of other animals. They are able to interpret the footprints, okay, the pug marks, the paw marks that they see. So they're all, they have this heightened awareness about the sounds and signs of this, of the universe, and the clock, okay, the diurnal clock that exists. Now, so when you talk about communication between creatures, we know that communication is a two-way process. So creatures speak, and when some creatures are speaking, other creatures are listening, and they interpret what they listen, and then they communicate again. So it's communication is you have the communication loop, which involves two creatures or more creatures, and all of them are listening. They speak, they listen. And in this passage, they say that the whole of nature was on tenterhooks, as it were. They were anxiously waiting, and they seemed to be in a kind of bondage at that point of time. And this corresponds to what the Bible says about nature. Nature is in bondage. Okay, after the fall of man, nature is no longer pristine and pure, but nature is warped. Nature is corrupted because death has come into the world. So things live and die, and nature is no longer part of paradise. Nature has fallen from paradise. Nature is not in Eden. And this nature is in bondage, and this nature is waiting for uh, the second coming, as it were, waiting for the day of liberation. In a similar way, in a similar rhetoric is used to even in the Whale Rider, to speak to describe and to present nature which feels unfulfilled, nature which all these creatures which feel that their lives are incomplete and that they are waiting for something to happen. And what is that something that they were waiting for? They were waiting for the Whale Rider. And so when they saw the Whale Rider, they realized that this was the great leader, the great deliverer, the great guardian that they were waiting for, whom they were waiting for. The flying fish was the first to spot this creature, the Whale Rider, who was a man, okay? And water streamed away from him, and he opened his mouth to grasp the cold air. His eyes were shining with splendor, his body dazzled with diamond spray. Upon the beast, he looked like a small tattooed figurine. So this beast was a huge whale, and this Whale Rider was this little dazzling creature who was seated on the whale. And he was pulling the whale into the sky. There was this little figure, almost looking like a figurine. This creature seated on the whale was pulling the whale into the sky. This creature, powerful creature, was the Whale Rider. Now, what does the Whale Rider represent? The Whale Rider is a creative spirit because he has power to make things happen. So he describes this Whale Rider flinging spears, some spears into the sea, some towards the land, and some in midair. So as he throws spears, they evolve instantly into creatures. So this is a creative spirit. Some spears turned into pigeons, some changed into eels. And all along, you had the song of the sea. It was accompanying this magic of creation. This wonder of creation was the song of the sea, and it was an ageless music. So all creation stories from different parts of the world, which come from different cultures and religious backgrounds, they celebrate something coming out of nothing. All right. There was chaos, according to the biblical account. There was chaos. There was only water. And then God said, let the water separate. There was sky and there was sea. Let there be light. So things were called into existence. That is the point I'm making. So things are called into existence from nothing. Okay, so as he threw spears into the sea and the sky and the earth, creatures came into being. Now, this corresponds to also the Dreamtime stories of the Australian Aboriginal people, where the spirit beings created things. So Dreamtime stories are creation stories. So spirit beings in a certain place would walk across the land, and as they walked, rivers would be created. Sometimes spirit beings were punished and they became stones. So like this, the land has some landforms which are associated with these Dreamtime beings, these spirits, all right, and spirit beings. In this case, the spirit being is the whale rider. And the whale rider is a man who is astride a huge whale, and he has this power to create. Now, there was one wooden spear which the whale rider tried to throw, but it refused to leave his hand. So this is the story. This spear could not be thrown. So the whale rider uttered a prayer of the spear, and he planted it, all right, on the land. Let this spear be planted in years to come, for there are sufficient spears already implanted. Let this be the one to flower when the people are troubled and it is most needed. So this spear is planted for a later time, for time to come. So what we understand from this wooden spear is that even these creative beings have their limitations. They are not gods. They are not omnipotent. They are not almighty. This creative being, he is able to create eels and pigeons and creatures of the sea, but then he cannot cross the boundaries that have been set for him. And this wooden spear, he realizes it is meant for time to come, and he prays over it. So you see the humility there. You see that he acknowledges and accepts his limitations, and he interprets, he discerns, he understands that it is not metamorphosing into a being for some reason. And instead of being angry with that wooden spear or cursing it for not performing, he bows his head with all humility and prays and plants it. He discerns that this spear is meant for another period of time when it is needed. So that is one of the things that people need to learn from indigenous people, that they have this understanding that the planet is not for the short-term gains of greedy human beings. So indigenous people are against mining, mining where you take all the resources of the land, you take the resources of the sea. So mining rivers, mining seas, mining rocks, quarrying mountains. Of nature to meet the greed of man, and to be totally, absolutely unthinking of the future of the planet. Okay, so he thinks about the future of the people, and that this is meant for a later period. And then the narrative has a lot about the music, the music of the universe. All the creatures sing, the whales sing, the sea sings, the creatures in them sing, and there's this harmonious sound, this music which is beautiful, which is ageless. So these are the adjectives used for music. One is, it's called ageless music. That means it has been there from time immemorial. And the land and the sea open themselves to him. All right. The song in the sea drenched the air. So imagine, so the sea sings, all right, and the land and the sea open themselves. So can you see that kind of um, harmony, the connectedness between sea and land, right? And we know that, um, and another thing about indigenous the indigenous worldview is they know that they that power can be abused. The sea has power to invade the land, right? But when the sea is at peace with itself and the land, it will not invade the land. So there are communities in Australia also where people of the land, uh, of especially of lands which are prone, which are in which storms of which are often ravaged by storms, and where the sea could invade the land due to the weather due to the climatic conditions. They they speak to the sea and tell the sea not to invade the land. All right. So the whole idea that the sea has a personality, that the sea thinks, feels, listens, is not inanimate, and the sea will understand when you make a request to the sea to stay within its bounds and not to invade the land. So, this kind of deep respect for the elements, deep respect for all the things in nature, knowing that uh, interdependence is the way of all creatures. All right, the way interdependence is how the universe functions. Interdependence between the elements and creatures. So you see, the giant whales had migrated 4 months earlier from their Antarctic feeding range to mate, calve, and rear their young in two large calm bays. Their leader, the ancient bull whale, together with the elderly females, fluted whale songs of benign magnificence as they watched over the rest of the herd. And here you see how the bull whale feels indebted to the human beings. There's a story over here. There's a mother whale which had been ravaged by sharks. All right, and she was crying in the shallows of Hawaii. Um, and at that time, there was a golden human being who succored this bull whale, who was a tiny, a tiny young whale, and he witnessed his mother being savaged by sharks. At that time, a human being came to his rescue. The human heard the young whale's distress and had come into the sea playing a flute. So, bull whales have their reason for being and the whale community itself have their reason for being indebted or loving the people of uh, Wangara, right? Because there was a gold in their ancestry, there was this golden human being who connected with the whales. Now, in this community of people in Wangara, they their ancestor is Kahua Te Rangi, right? And the leader of the tribe, Kora Apirana, he preserves the culture. He has community meetings, and it is a patriarchal society. And he shares traditional knowledge with the young men in the community. Now, after him, who would be the successor is something that bothers him, because he has a great granddaughter. All right. His son does not have has his son doesn't have a male child, but rather the first child is a girl. But Apirana's wife, Nanny Flowers, she decides that this child should be named after their ancestor, Kahute Rangi. And he thinks that a girl child cannot bear this name, and a girl child cannot uh, don the mantle of leader of the community. And this is where the what do you say, the power of the narrative is that there is this child who is not liked by her grandfather, who is seen as whose worth is not realized. And Viti Himera beautifully narrates how this child has this connectedness. So the takeaway from here, from this whole thing, could be that each person has their innate potential, and knowing intuitively what is your purpose in life could make all the difference. And this child, Kahu, even from the time she was a few days old, has known that she is connected to the whales. Now, they had a meeting hall where the male members of that community would meet. And on top of this, if you looked at the Maori woodwork, which we discussed when we did Potiki, didn't we do that? And we saw the panels and the carvings that are done in the for the meeting houses. And here you have this in this Wangara, this place, they have the figure of Kahu Tia Terangi on the whale. Okay, so this this carved figure is there on top of the meeting house. So whenever Koro Apirana went past the meeting house, he would look up at the figure of Kahutia Terangi on the whale and shake his head sorrowfully. Why would he do that? Because he was feeling very bad that there wouldn't be a male successor. But this did not worry his wife, Nanny Flowers, who firmly believed that this little baby girl, Kahu, was going to take over from her great-grandfather. And why did she believe this? Now, so she came from another tribe and she married into Kora Apirana's tribe. And her tribe their ancestor was Muriwai. Okay. And so Muriwai is female. Yeah. So there is a story about Muribai, she came to New Zealand on the Matatua canoe. And when the canoe approached Wakatane, which is a long way from this village, the Muriwai's chieftainly brothers, led by Torawa, went to investigate the land. While they were away, however, the sea began to rise and the current carried the canoe close to the rocks that Muribai knew all on board would surely perish. So what did she do? She chanted special prayers, asking the gods to give her the right and open a way for her to take charge. Then she made this prayer. She cried out in Maori language, "Now I shall make myself a man." She called out to the crew, and ordered them to start paddling quickly, and the canoe was saved in the nick of time. So this is her ancestor, okay, Muribai. So, but for Muribai's intervention, the canoe would have been wrecked. So she says, I am proud that Muribai's blood flows in my veins. So you see, beliefs and belief systems evolve. Now, Koro Apirana is deeply entrenched in the traditions of Wangara, and his mind is fixed, and he laments the fact that there is no that the firstborn for his grandson is not a male, and this child and he wants male offspring so that they can be included in the spiritual what do you say, the spiritual togetherness and prayers, or the spiritual power of the community, and they could function as leaders of the community. Little did he realize that this community also is going to change. It has to change. His mind was not open to change. It was Nanny Flowers who has scripted this paradigm shift, as it were, in their traditional beliefs. It is a paradigm shift because it has been patriarchal till now, and the shift that is made through Kahu becoming the a kind of spiritual leader of the community, it has been made possible only through Nanny Flowers and her belief system, and Muribai being her ancestor. So what we understand about culture here is that culture is not static. Culture evolves. And though we hold on to tradition, and tradition has to continue, tradition has to be perpetuated, yet it is not a mindless kind of practice of tradition. There should be that discernment, that open-mindedness, that frame of mind which reads changes in times and seasons. So did you get what I'm saying? Yes? Were you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's not about a shift from patriarchy to matriarchy. It is about a shift that has taken place where the ancestors, the spiritual powers watching over the Wangara people have sensed, have um, favored Kahu and appointed her to be the savior of her people. And because, as you know, the story progresses and the whole community is on the brink of disaster, because the whales, whales, they come and birth on the shore. They are washed ashore, and the whole whale community, they have almost pledged to kill themselves, they have willed themselves to death. And there was the ancient bull whale which came up to the shore, and this bull whale, the whole Koro Apirana realizes, and the whole community of men, they come together, they try to strap the whale and send him back into the sea, but he turns around and heads for land. And the sea is tumultuous. Okay, there is so much disturbance in the air, but Kahu realizes, and she goes into that situation, and then she is drawn into the sea, and then but healing comes to the land, and the sea creatures, they return Kahu to her own people. So when she comes back to the land, she's unconscious. When she's hospitalized, and she gets all right, she's restored to normal health. So we were talking about Muribai, right? And Nanny Flowers, she is very determined. She is, because of her strong faith that comes from knowing who her ancestors. So she comes from a different community, and she believes, she acts on what she believes about woman power, and she has sensed that Kahu is uh, a unique child, a child who is going to be the leader of her people, and this birth cord has to be placed in the earth, right? So she does that. She gets her nephews to help her, and it is done. Then you also see that Viti Himera uses the Maori language. The Maori language is included in the text. And this is one of the features of post-colonial writing, where they assert the importance of their languages. They assert, how do you know that, how can you say that you are Tamil? Because you speak Tamil, right? So language and identity are inseparable. So keeping the language in the text is one way of asserting identity. There is also one instance of a Native American writer who writes in Cree, who writes in English, but in his novels, there are certain passages written in Cree, and those passages are not translated. So the person who reads that the novel is lost here and there because it doesn't understand what is written in Cree. And that is deliberately done to make the real reader realize that there are certain things that not every experience can be rendered through translation, that we cannot appropriate knowledge of another culture. We cannot, I'm repeating myself, we cannot appropriate knowledge of another culture. Appropriate is just to take it and make it your own. So people who are outside the indigenous culture, outside Maori culture, or outside Cree culture, cannot appropriate everything of Cree knowledge and experience. So we see that this Maori language is brought in here. It's probably here he has probably translated what he has written in Maori, but he wants the sounds of his language. He wants his Maori sounds to be in the text, because that is part of the music that comprises their existence. Is there some disturbance? Am I audible? Okay, there was some disturbance now, right? Yeah. Yeah, now it's okay. Okay. And now, and this baby Kahu's mother dies, and so the child could be taken away by the grandparents on the mother's side. But even in the face of that challenge, Nanny Flowers tells Kahu, never mind, your birth cord is here. This is where you belong. You will always return. You will never be lost to us. So that deep faith, all right, the faith that looks beyond the present. And you can see in Nanny Flowers grit, determination, uh, faith, discernment. So this is what if you have to talk about Maori spirituality, all right, if you have to talk about Maori spirituality, you have to talk about the spirituality of Nanny Flowers. You have to talk about about the harmony in the universe, about the creatures and how they all live in harmony, how they all uh, know what is their role in the universe, and they are so conscious of the consciousness of the past and the consciousness of the future, and where they are headed, the sensitivity to discern uh, mm, destruction that is approaching, to preserve, to guard the peace and harmony of the universe, the to recognize the interdependence. And the thing about our universe is this uh, interdependence, the links between and the connectedness. All these links are very fragile. If you break one link, everything goes haywire. That I'm making. So the connectedness in the universe is as fragile as the web of the spider, the web as the threads woven by the threads of a spider's web. So a spider's web can easily be destroyed, and a spider's web is so complex, right? That's how complex the universe is, and that's how complex the connectedness in the universe is. But if one thread of this connectedness is broken, then the whole thing collapses. And then listening is a very important attribute of the whales, the sea. Even Kahu is always seen listening. She's listening to the stories, the traditional stories that are told by the grandfather in the meeting house. He takes all efforts to see that the child is kept away from the meeting house, but somehow she goes into the meeting house. She's under a table, or she's always listening to the stories, the traditional stories of the Wangara people. Why? Because she has that deep sense of belonging to the community, to the land, and having profound respect for the creatures who guard the land. So it's kind of you can also call it, if you want to give a name to this, you can call it indigenous cosmology. Okay. So their view, the indigenous people's view of the cosmos, how the cosmos works, how the cosmos operates. You can make a note of that term, indigenous cosmology, which I have not brought into these notes. So now this in chapter 6, you have the genealogy of Koro Apirana and the people. And these people are connected to the whale rider Kahutya Terangi. That's what it says. And I mentioned, we discussed this earlier. There are people who had come, the inhabitants, early inhabitants of Wangara had come by canoe. And in Wangara, prior to the coming of Kahutya Rangi, there were people, but the land was not blessed only after the coming of Kahu Te Rangi, and we know only of his descendants. Okay, and this community and the spiritual people in this community have knowledge of whale speaking. They speak to the whales. So their ancestor Pakya asked the whale to bring him to our land as far as the south, and it was done. Baby Kahu also has the ability to speak to whales. And even when she was very small and she was a tiny baby, her uncle had gone to watch a film on whales, and there was the harpooning of whales was being screened. This tiny baby who was in his jacket, she started crying when the whale was wounded. So you can see that she always felt this connectedness to whales. Another thing about indigenous stories is that sometimes these landforms also tell stories. As I said, sometimes certain creatures become rock. So if you see a rock which looks like a bird, in all probability, it was a bird at one point of time. So here they say that this land itself is in the shape of a whale. So there was a whale which transformed itself into the island. Okay, then Kahu proves that she is the chosen one. And there is a test of where Koro Apirana has oriented his team of young men, and he's hoping that from one of them would emerge the leader of the Wangara, the future leader of the Wangara people. And one of the tests is that a carved stone, a sacred stone, would be thrown into the sea, and the person who goes and retrieves it, only that person would have this sacred knowledge and be the leader of the people. But none of those men are able to do it, and Kahu, who was around, she does it. Then you have the climax where the whales they are stranded. Actually, they deliberately these whales birth themselves, BERTH. They birth themselves on the shore. And this birthing of whales on the shore is there's a similar thing in Amitav Ghosh's Gun Island. So if someone wants to do a comparative study of the whale rider and Gun Island, you can do it. And okay. So these whales are stranded, and the ancient bull whale, he is willing himself to death. He wants to protest against the death of whales. And there are 5 or 6 elderly female whales who come close to this bull whale and plead with him to go back to the sea, to give up his protest. But the bull whale is adamant. Koro also speaks to the whale and says, "Sacred whale, we wish to live. Return to the sea. Return to your kingdom of Tangaroa." So he can see that disaster is looming large, and the Wangara people might be wiped off the face of the earth itself, because the whales of such sensitive creatures have shown their utmost anger, sadness, because their world has been disturbed by man. And only Kahu can save the situation. She believes this. If the whale lives, we live. So this statement, if the whale lives, we live, that can be taken as a broader frame of reference for man's connectedness to nature. If nature prospers, if nature thrives, if nature is preserved, we live. If nature lives, we live. All right. If the trees around us live, we live. So this, you can do an eco-critical reading of this text. And when you do an eco-critical reading of this text, you have to take this as the maxim, this as the principle. All right. If the whale lives, the people live. If nature lives, man lives. We have lost our way of talking to whales. So now what Viti Himara does in terms of maybe creating understanding about man's connectedness to the world of nature, he's only telling us the story of one community of people and their reverence for the sea and creatures of the sea, and more specifically the whales, and how this is not textbook knowledge. As I said, in their understanding of cosmology, in their understanding of how the universe operates, and this this is a microcosm. All right, Wangara is a microcosm. So you have you heard the terms microcosm and macrocosm? So yes, so Wangara is a microcosm, and what is happening in Wangara is has a wider frame of reference, and which is the macrocosm. So the whole universe. So when they say if the whale lives, we live, you can substitute whale with nature. We have lost our way of talking to whales. Whales again can be substituted with nature. We have lost our way of talking to nature, communing with nature, being connected to nature. So you see, only Kahu is able to communicate with this stubborn whale who is irate about about the ways of human beings. And only Kahu is able to console that whale, communicate to that whale, reach out to the whale, and the whale is so happy with her. The whales, the whole community of whales, they take her with them to the depths of the sea. Now this whale mistook Kahu for its old master, Kahu's ancient ancestor, Kahutya Terangi. Overjoyed, the whale returned to the sea and descended back into the water, and the rest of the herd with Kahu in tow. And then the epilogue says, completes the story, which says that Kahu, one of the whales, the oldest mother whales, she tells her husband, the bull whale, that he has mistaken this little girl for the ancestor Kahutya Terangi. And so she convinces him to set free this little girl and to return her to the human world, return her back to the land Vangara. That she is the spear he cast into the future. So remember the wooden spear? So now this Kahu is that wooden spear. That spear which was needed at that point in time to save the people of Vangara. And now you understand the symbolism of the placenta of the birth cord being buried in the ground. So now this birth cord being buried in the ground, that is the wooden spear which has saved the people of Vangara. So in terms of questions, if you are asked about the woman power in the narrative, do an eco-critical reading of the text. You will talk about the music of the spheres, the harmony, the whale rider being a creative spirit, and that all creatures are in tune with the cosmos. They know their place in the universe. Only man does not know his place in the universe, and man oversteps, and man is intrusive and causes harm to the world of whales. And you see that, this when one of the whales is washed ashore, there are people there are what do you call them? There are whale butchers who are sawing off the flesh of the whale even while it is alive and it is bleeding to death. So, and that is when the wrath of nature comes upon the land. So, can you work this out for yourself, all this?
Yes, ma'am. I have a doubt.
Yeah.
But about the butchers, but a whale being washed ashore was a sign of a gift from God. So they welcomed it and they ate the whale. No?
No,
Okay.
there were two kinds of responses to the whale. There were people who wanted the whale to be protected, and they wanted to be nice to the whale, and there were others there were two types of people on the scene, and the bad people prevailed. The goodies and the baddies. They are,
Yeah, at
yeah,
the end, yes,
yes,
the bad guys.
yeah, the bad guys and the good guys. And there are people praying that the whale should be well, the whale should return. Yeah.
But
Any
before that massacre, the author says that a whale being washed ashore was usually seen as a gift from God, and hence they were happy to cut the whale's meat and eat it. But not in
Not in
case
this
of
no,
washing.
no. Yeah, they cannot cut the whale. In
Okay,
this culture, they don't eat whale meat.
really? Okay,
They may eat fish, but not whale.
okay.
They're supposed to be kind to the whales. They are supposed to respect the whale. Their yeah, their ancestors are whale rider, right?
Yes.
Mm. Um, I'll just tell you a bit about the woman in the lampshade. May I, or if I give you notes, that will. So about the pear tree dance. You have the pear tree dance, right?
Yes, ma'am.
One of the stories you did I say pear tree dance? Oh, Uncle
Yes,
Bernard's pear tree dance. Yes, sir.
we have.
Woman in a lampshade. Oh, pear tree dance is the first story. Yeah. So this pear tree dance, the protagonist there is, she's called the newspaper of Claremont Street. In other words, like she is the lady who, she's the gossip of the place, and she does domestic work for different houses on the street. So she goes to, whenever she goes to a house to do work, she fills them up on what's happening in town. And she earned her living by doing other people's work, right? But um, she saved up enough money doing this work, and she bought land, and she planted pear trees, right? Um, so this was her dream. So this story is basically about settlers. Settlers, um, they settlers and migrants to Australia, they make a livelihood, and uh, they dream of having a good life, and one of their dreams, of course, is to have land, have land that gives them uh, a better life. All land is somebody's land. For Weekly, the thought of she's Weekly is this person, this character, and the thought of possessing some seemed more of an impertinence than a possibility. Perhaps this was because she had spent her childhood in a slaty backyard where nothing would grow except thin carrots and a few sunflowers. All round the place where she lived, the slag heaps smoldered and cinders fell on the paths. The children gathered to play in a little thicket of stunted thorn bushes and elderberry trees. There were patches of coltsfoot, and they picked the yellow flowers eagerly till none was left. Back home in the Black Country, where all coal mines and brick kilns and iron foundries, her family had never had a house or garden. Now, back home is England. Okay, so the England of the Victorian era. You've read Charles Dickens stories. You've seen the uh, warehouses, the factories, the living conditions, all very bleak. You think of novels like Hard Times, Oliver Twist. Um, so when people were who came to Australia, they either came um, as transportees, they were transported for petty theft. So the poor of England, England's poor, were the ones who landed in Australia. So where she lived in England, it was all coal mines and brick kilns. iron foundries, for her family had never had a house or garden. Weekly had nothing behind her, not even the place where she was born. It no longer existed. Later, she left her country with employed. All her life, she had done domestic work. She was neat and quick and clean, and her hands were rough like nutmeg graters. And she knew all there was to know about people and their ways of living. Weekly lived in a rented room. It was covered with brown linoleum, which she polished. Now we don't know. There's nothing given to us about Weekly's this character, the protagonist, Weekly's family background. Who were her parents? Did she have siblings? She's all alone here. Who knows? She might have been one of the felons also transported. Um, and here, after working and saving up a bit of money, she is she buys a plot of land where she has pear trees, right? So, towards the end of the story, we see that she went to take a look at the 5 acres. On Sunday, Weekly went to look at the 5 acres. It was more lovely than she had expected and fragrant. A great many tall trees had been left standing, and the tin shack turned out to be a tiny weatherboard cottage. She was afraid she had come to the wrong place. It must be someone's home, she thought to herself as she peered timidly through the cottage window and saw that it was full of furniture. And then she meets Mr. Rusk, and she acquires this land, and he tells her uh, that everything is included in the price, including the cottage. Buying land takes time, but Weekly contained herself in silence and patience, working hard all the days. She began to buy things: a spade, rubber boots, some candles, grow pack them into an old car. Last of all, she bought a pear tree. It looked so wizened, she wondered how it could ever grow. Carefully, she wrapped it in wet newspapers, laid it in a thin baby, laid it like a thin baby along the back seat. On the day Mr. Rusk gave her the key, Weekly went to work with it pinned inside her dress. She felt it would against her ribs all morning. She drove out to her piece of land. The same trees and fragrance of the cottage were all there as before. This time she noticed honeysuckle and roses, a fig tree, and a hedge of rosemary. Well, okay, what she did is she went down on her knees and she dug the earth, and then she uh, planted her pear tree. Choosing a place for the pear tree, she dug a hole. It was harder to dig in the day than she thought it would be, and she had to pause to rest several times. She carried some dark earth from under a fallen tree over the hole. Carefully, she held the little tree in position and scattered the dark, soft earth round the roots. She shook the little tree, and scattered it in more earth, and then she firmed the soil, treading gently around and round the tree. For the first time in her life, the newspaper of Claremont Street, or Weekly, as she was called, was dancing. Stepping round and round the little tree, she imagined herself to be like a bride by all sides. Round and round the tree, dancing firmly the soft yielding earth with her new boots and foil label blown of the evening came a fragile music for the pear tree dance. Um, now, this is basically about early settlers, okay? And um, give the details which are given. She came from a place where there were coal mines. So it could be even Ireland, because many Irish people were transported. So um, the Kellys, the true history of the Kelly gang tells you the story of how the British ill-treated the Irish migrants, and how they had a hard time. And even in the true history of the Kelly gang, uh, there again, the aspiration is for land, land that they can cultivate. But somehow the Kellys are always getting into trouble with the with authority, and the system is such that they are in and out of prison, and they're never able to keep their head above the water. They are slated to be mm, criminals, and and fringe dwellers, and uh, on the fringes of society. They will always be poor. They will never be able to come up, and that is how the British uh, that is the place that the British relegated to the Irish. So the newspaper of Claremont Street Weekly could be a person with Irish ancestry, or she could even be British. But here we see that she is a lone survivor, and she's all alone. There are there's no kith, there are no kith and kin. Uh, and this is the sad, there's a lot of sadness in the lives of the early migrants, and you see the grit, sheer grit and determination. And there's a lot of cheerfulness in her. So what is Elizabeth Jolley celebrating in the Pear Tree Dance, if I may ask? What is she celebrating about the Australian spirit, or the spirit of the settlers? So one is this person is a woman, right? So she's a woman. She's a so you have this feminist reading of the text also. Suppose you're asked, do a feminist reading of the Pear Tree Dance. What would you say? So you have to give a background to who Elizabeth Jolley was, one of the writers of the 80s, and a feminist writer. And here she is celebrating the stoic uh, stoicity, okay, the stoic nature of women migrants, women pioneers in Australia, women who uh, earned their livelihood and who acquired land and made a life for themselves solely on the strength of their determination and their doggedness, their courage. Mm, this kind of celebration. You can see this kind of a strong woman who came from England for to become entrepreneur, to become a pioneer. You see that in Peter Carey's Oscar and Lucinda also. There's a lady who comes with some of the wealth that she has, with a little money, comes to Australia, buys land, and has a farm. All right. So you see that in you also, so the entrepreneurial spirit, the enterprising spirit, and the strength and fortitude of the early settlers. Did you get the theme of Petri dance? Yes or no? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, yes, we will.
So you heard me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Woman in a Lampshade is also about a woman who wants to be a writer. So the questions that you can get on Elizabeth Jolley is Elizabeth Jolley as a feminist writer. So it's about a woman who wants to be a writer, and it's about all the odds that she faces. This is something that Virginia Woolf said also in a room of one's own, that women don't get space to write, and many women writers have uh, expressed this angst, this agony, that they there's nothing called the writer's space for a woman. A woman is mother, a woman is wife, and even the lady who wrote Gone with the Wind, she would Margaret Mitchell, she would hide her papers under a mattress, and many women writers complain that um, they their thoughts are interrupted by the doorbell ringing, and they cannot finish something that they started writing. So this idea of a woman having space to write. So this now this lampshade, you know what is a lampshade? It is not the regular lampshade. It is a kind of hat. If you look at a hat, can you see this? So this is a kind of hat which she wears, which has a light over it. There's a light attached to it, and she is writing and typing away. In the story, you see that she is sharing this room with her husband, and she needs the space to write, and she wears a lampshade. So you may be asked to explain the title Woman in a Lampshade. So you will say that this lady, the lampshade symbolizes the odds against which a woman has to work in order to be a writer. Did you get what I'm saying? Yes. So did you see the picture? Yes. Can you see the picture? Yeah. She's wearing this lampshade and she is typing her whatever she's writing, her novel or story or whatever. Did you get that point, girls? Okay, so then this lady, Jasmine, she's the writer, and then she goes to her farm because she wants a place to write. So domestic life always comes in the way of a woman wanting to be a writer. And this narrative raises the question, is the home really a woman's space? Okay. Um, it is a space that controls her. It's a space that she controls and also a space that controls her. So she needed to break out of this cozy domesticity, um, and she tells her husband, she assures her husband that she will go to the farmhouse and she'll be very careful not to pick up strangers. Okay. However, she meets this stranger and she gives him a lift. And this person, he is cold and hungry, and all he does is he keeps sleeping, sleeping, and she's sitting, she's sharing the same bed with him, but she wears her lampshade and keeps typing. And she talks to this young man about her writing, and she talks about other writers. And while she's writing over there, this young man also becomes one of the characters in her writing. He says that he works as a receptionist at uh, a hotel, and that he has been to India. He has worked in this hotel in France. And then she writes a poem and she gives that poem to him. This young man, he wants to continue staying on the farm. But why she takes on this mysterious character, why she takes him with him in her car, why she keeps him with her on the farm, all this is idiosyncratic to say the least. It's strange behavior even on her part, but um, this vagabond like character uh, it's her need for companionship in a way, and not knowing who he is, where he is from. Um, it somehow reminiscent or reminds you of Kerwin in the Bone People, you know, where there's a person who wants to withdraw from the structured life that she has, and she connects with a total stranger, with Simon, the child Simon, and the man Joe. And she finds this anonymity of this Joe, the anonymity, just the way this lady, the woman in the lampshade, the anonymity of this man, who he is, where he is from, actually quite comforting. So, this is a very important point to note, that an unknown person might be better company than someone whom you know. Better in the sense, might be less baggage as company, less worry as company. Uh, Probably the very idea that this is momentary, transient, and each will move on. Okay, that the woman in the lampshade, will move on, that the young man will move on, is quite liberating for her. So you can dwell on feminist thought in uh, Elizabeth Jolley's writing with reference to the pear tree dance and the woman in the lampshade. So, pear tree dance, you have to focus on early settlers, on European migrants, and uh, here in and in the for the woman in the lampshade, it's about early Australian women writers and how they had and their struggles in establishing themselves. Gillian Whitlock has written a book about modern Australian women writers, and she cites 8 writers, among which Elizabeth Jolley is one. So the modern women writers, right? Elizabeth Jolley is one of the leading figures among the modern women writers of Australia. And then you have House and Land. House and Land, I think, is self-explanatory because there again is about early settlers in New Zealand. Okay, so look at the title, House and Land. Uh, these are two things that uh, settlers aspire for. It's one of the basic requirements. Oh, by the way, when we spoke about the pear tree dance, the settlers in Australia, so there are many indigenous trees. Okay, like that, the bottle tree. There's so many indigenous tree. You can look up all these indigenous trees. The eucalyptus, of course, is indigenous. They call it the gum tree, but she's she brings a pear tree. So basically, you see in the when in the when they had these settlements, when they created little settlements for themselves, and there was a community of people who cleared uh, trees, cleared the ground of all the eucalyptus trees, and then what did they plant? They planted plums and pears and peaches, and they wanted to create a little England. Okay, so recreating England, so that nostalgia for home. So you see in this story also, she talks about back home. Back home was coal mines, all right, and back home life was dreary. So she is very happy about the sunshine and air of Australia, but the idea of home, it can be home to her when she plants a pear tree. Did you get that? Okay.
Can I also refer to the settlers as well, being uprooted from their homeland?
Yes, the pear tree has a lot of symbolism. It's when she's planting, the idea of planting a tree. It's about it is about finding rootedness. But in that pursuit to uh, establish roots in the Australian soil. So it is when she plants a pear tree, it's about how she wants to put down roots, but the roots that she puts down go back to her own ancestry. Understand? She wants to put a tree with which is connected to her life back home. So come to the poem House and Land. So house, land. These are two things that settlers want. Anyone settling anywhere, even in India, moving from the village to the city, they want a house. They want an apartment. So that gives you a sense of security, sense of belonging. Yeah. So, yeah. Wasn't this the site, asked the historian, of the original homestead? Homestead refers to the a house in an agricultural setting. So the homestead is the main house, and basically in Australia and New Zealand, the farms were sheep farms. So in the center of a sheep farm, you would have a homestead or a dairy farm. All right. Uh, couldn't tell you, said the cowman. I just live here, he said. Snowland, can you screen the poem House and Land? Possible? Oh, I should make you host, right? Wait 1 second. You don't bother, I'll screen it because I have to make you host. Oh my God, where is it gone? Send me the link. I've got it. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So there are uh, you see the two voices here in the first stanza. One is the voice of the historian, and then you have the cowman. So he's the person on the dairy farm. So the historian asks, wasn't this the site of the original homestead? So wasn't this the place where the farmer's house, the homestead is the farmer's house, the house of the dairy farmer? Couldn't tell you, said the cowman. I just live here, he said, working for old Miss Wilson since the old man's been dead. Moping under the blue gums, the dog trailed his chain from the privy as far as the fowl house and back to the privy again, feeling the stagnant afternoon quicken with the smell of rain. So this is cowman. He's not very educated. He knows is that he says, I just work for this lady. There sat old Miss Wilson with her pictures on the wall. The baronet uncle, the mother's side, the one she called the hall, taking tea from a silver pot. So she's very proud of her ancestry, old Miss Wilson, and she is Miss Wilson. So there is no question of a spouse being there, and no question of progeny. So not that this she has offspring, and there's going to be another generation after her. So she is living in the past with pictures of her uncle and her aunt. Now, when you read Australian literature, you'll see this kind of thing in the writings of Henry Handel Richardson. Henry Handel Richardson, by the way, was not a man, but a woman who wrote under that pseudonym. And she wrote though she was an Australian writer, the writings were about back home, about uh, life in London, in England, and also even the ambience of the home in Australia would always be uh, teeming with connections to imperial London. So she has a picture of her baronet uncle on her mother's side, and she has the English tea, taking tea from a silver pot. Typical Australian would be, they would use you'd have the swag man, the people out in the bush making tea in a billy. A billy is like a can over a fire. So those are the kind of images you come across in the bush stories. Barbara Painton's uh, The Drover's Wife, and things, stories like that. People in the colonies, she said, can't quite understand why, from Waiau to the mountains, it was all father's land. So New Zealand is a colony. She's all of 80, said the cowman, down at the milking shed. I'm leaving here next winter. Too bloody quiet, he said. The spirit of exile, wrote the historian, is strong in the people still. He reminds me rather, said Miss Wilson, of Harriet's youngest Will, the cowman home from the shed when drinking, with the rabbiter home from the hill. So this cowman, he's he's working class. He works for Miss Wilson. So you see the working class, and probably Miss Wilson is the daughter. Obviously, Miss Wilson is the daughter of a settler, and uh, her parents are no more. She's just living on the past. Pictures of the baronet uncle from England, and there's no future for her. This man, he just works for her, and he's planning to leave. The cowman home from the shed when drinking. So at the end of the day, the working class man, he unwinds with a drink. With the rabbiter home from the hill. So as a man who catches rabbits. The sensitive northwest afternoon collapsed and the rain came. The dog crept into his barrel looking lost and lame. But you can't attribute to either awareness of what great gloom. So gloom is a very telling word here. Stands in a land of settlers with never a soul at home. So it is. So in this poem, House and Land, Alan Kurnow paints a picture of a desolate, barren land, desolate place, where white settlers uh, uh, are are few, and especially when settlers have lived on farms, so not they're not in cities, so there's no sense of community. There are people who have settled in New Zealand who's who had probably no offspring, or if the children they had children, it was like this lady, she's not married, and uh, thinly populated New Zealand at the time of Kurnow writing this poem. Now New Zealand is a multicultural nation with drawing people from different parts of the globe. Chinese people, Indian, so many people of different cultural backgrounds have settled, and it is a multicultural country. But this is about early New Zealand, the early days of New Zealand, where the land was very sparsely populated. Okay, that's it. Any questions?
That poem reminded me of a rose for Emily.
So I'll share. That poem reminded you of
A rose for Emily by William.
what?
A
Uh,
rose, a rose for Emily by Faulkner.
can you text?
Emily? Okay. A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner.
Okay, okay. Yes, the loneliness there. Yes.
Yeah, and the dilapidated buildings and
Yes, yes. Where there's no continuity of the line. There's no continuity of the family line. Yes. So thank you, girls. Anything you want to ask me? Hope this was useful. So shall we close? I'll close, okay? Shall I close, girls?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.